There was something strange showing up on our radars, and I didn't like it at all. I had all my focus on the controls of the ship. I had made a promise to take this crew back home safely, and I intended to keep it. Now that our exploratory mission was over, I just needed to avoid any inconveniences, and we would be able to call it a success. Then why on earth was I staring at a blinking red dot in the margin of one of those radars? It didn't make any sense. It wasn't any identifiable planet, nor any sort of asteroid on the move. And there was nothing else supposed to be around here. As if there had been any doubts in my mind about what I was seeing, my co-pilot, Ella, called my name from the seat next to mine. "Captain Stephen, are you seeing this?" she wondered. "I am." I nodded curtly. "Please, get me more information on the object." "On it," Ella replied. She acted quickly, running a few scans, activating additional features on our radars, and sending a sign to the rest of our crew. Then she asked me, "Can we get closer to it, Captain?" "Negative." I shook my head. "It's off our course." Ella hummed thoughtfully, and I knew she didn't like my answer. But then she proceeded to give me as much data as she could. Every new piece of information was worse than the last. It's been confirmed it's not a planet, nor any kind of asteroid known to us. There's little to no movement, no force of gravity, no direction. It is merely floating. The shape is unidentifiable from this far, but it must be just slightly larger than our ship. There's a small sign of heat from this object, but I can't know more until we move closer. I tightened my fist around the controls of the ship, trying to come up with a reasonable explanation. But then the door of our cabin opened up, and the two remaining members of our crew entered, both engineers that kept the mechanics matters of our ship in peak conditions during the entirety of our journey. "I know what it is," the first engineer, Adam, called out with a proud smile, still wiping some black oil from his hands with a rag. "It can't be an old satellite. It's too big. It has to be the Trident." Just the name was enough to make a chill run through our bodies. Adam's voice trembled. Ella let out a small gasp, and I had to clear my throat in a poor attempt to hide any shock. Only Joshua, the last member of our crew, remained unaffected. "So what?" he smirked as he leaned his back against the wall of the cabin. "Ships fall all the time. Just because this 20-year-old piece of trash is still floating around doesn't make it interesting. I say we should move on. "Show some respect!" I snapped back at him and stood up from my seat. What happened at the Trident was a tragedy. The crew abandoned the ship during an emergency, but they were all dead by the time the escape pods arrived on Earth. This is not a laughing matter. This is one of the darkest pieces of history in our universe, and we'll never find out the truth of what made them want to escape in the first place. I was confident my words had caused the desired effect of respect and a small spark of fear intended. But nothing would have prepared me for the words I heard next. "We could," Ella said timidly at first, and then brimming with something I believed to be morbid curiosity. "We could find out the truth now. We are a short distance away from the ship, and we have sufficient supplies for a detour. We could." "No." I sighed heavily and dropped myself back down on my seat. This was none of our business, was it? "Come on, Stephen. I mean, Captain," Adam insisted. "You know that two of the members of the crew didn't even make it back to Earth, dead or alive. Don't you want to bring the bodies of the heroes back home?" Adam smiled, and I shook my head fondly at him. I knew he was trying to tempt me, but it wasn't enough. Not until Joshua spoke up again. "Haven't you heard the stories?" he asked, and his expression had changed. I couldn't tell if he was messing with us, or if he was truly and irrecoverably scarred. The bodies that arrived on Earth were frozen with an expression of inhumane terror in their cold blue faces. There's a theory that says they didn't die on the journey back home. Their lifeless bodies were put on the escape pods and sent away as a warning. And that's why nobody bothered to investigate further into the Trident, because two members of the crew went crazy and murdered their partners. And they're probably waiting for us there, ready to defend their territory. There was a tense silence afterward. The four of us exchanged uneasy looks. I'm certain we were all thinking the same thing. What could possibly happen to a person to make them turn against their team? And could it happen to one of us? I couldn't allow this sort of thought to take roots in our mind. I had to get my crew back under control. Bullshit, I said at the same time I started adjusting the course of our ship. The Trident is nothing more than an old derelict ship, and nothing could survive 20 years there. I will prove to you that there is nothing to be scared of, and we will bring those bodies back home to their families, so they can finally find the peace they deserved. In less than an hour, the four of us were standing on the gates between both ships. We all had our suits, oxygen supply, high-quality communication systems that allowed us to hear each other, and any outside threat that might come our way. Then, we jumped right in. The first step was the first bad sign. As soon as our boots, conditioned to give us a sense of gravity in the ships, touched the floor of this abandoned place, the entire structure groaned and whined like a wounded beast. It shook so hard it nearly threw all of us off balance. Instinctively, we clutched each other's arms to stay together until the trembling passed. "Maybe the ship doesn't want us here," Joshua said. I think maybe Adam or Ella tried to argue with him and his ominous words, but I didn't even want to listen. I started marching forward, knowing they would have to follow me. But nothing, absolutely nothing, was about to go as planned. The ship was a mess, to say the least. After 20 years of abandonment, every single thing was broken, falling off, somehow burned, frozen, or melted. It was impossible to try and guess what kind of horrors had destroyed this ship this way for 2 decades. But we didn't have to imagine the results. The ceiling and walls threatened to fall down on us, and still, we heard it all so clearly. The footsteps, the dripping of some liquid, and something, or someone breathing inside this derelict ship with us. At one point, Ella put her hand on my arm and asked me, "Are you sure there was no way something could have survived 20 years here?" "No," I replied. "Absolutely no one could do that." Back then, my brain didn't make the important distinction between something and someone. I knew that our colleagues had to be dead. I didn't imagine that something other than human could be in that spaceship with us. We were just exploring the broken ship with our flashlights. But tension was running high. As if my own rapid heartbeat wasn't enough, I was subject to listening to my partner's heavy breathing through the comms. It was distracting. All I know is that one moment we were rounding a corner, and the next, there was a person standing in the hallway with us. He was standing on his toes, barely touching the ground. His posture was so stiff, he was nearly bending backwards, and I feared his spine would break. His suit was raggedy, filthy and stained beyond recognition, and his helmet was missing. But he was right there. Long hair, bare, open eyes, and sickeningly green skin. He wasn't breathing at all. He couldn't be alive. Could he? "What the fuck?" Adam whispered. "Should we do something?" Ella added. None of us had time to react. That wasn't a survivor, and it wasn't a ghost. Much like the spaceship, that human body was an abandoned vessel, and it was infected with something vile. Suddenly, the body started spasming violently, until it spurted out something dark green that glittered under the light from our flashlights. We all flinched away, but the sinister-looking goo continued to pour out for an unnaturally long time. My team was screaming desperately, and I could swear there were giant spiders moving out of that disgusting liquid, coating the walls and floor of the ship. That was nothing humanity was prepared to deal with. But if it had kept that body from decomposing for 20 years, I didn't want to know what happened to the other one. "Abort mission!" I yelled. "Get back to the ship!" The four of us started running as far as we could, until we couldn't hear that explosion coming from that poor body suspended in the dark, until something crashed against my feet and knocked me down. My team stumbled too, and we had to scramble to our feet as quickly as possible. When we gathered ourselves and aimed our flashlights frantically in every direction. We finally hit the soulless glow of a pair of eyes. There was the other body. Not alive. Not quite human. It was dragging itself across the floor at surprising speed. Almost like a snake. While we heard the cracking of the bones, and the head lolled lifelessly from side to side, as if it was worth nothing. We continued to scream and ran back to our ship. At that moment of crossing over, that thing, that infected and invaded corpse continued to chase us. But this one, other than being astoundingly disturbing, didn't attack. I pushed my team forward and I turned around with a growl ready to protect them with my life, if necessary. That monstrosity slithered full speed toward me, and I kicked, and I kicked. I heard bones breaking. I heard the splashing of blood, and I still continued to kick until merciful pairs of arms dragged me back onto my own ship. The four of us lay on the ground exhausted and terrified, with tears filling our eyes and falling down our cheeks for the longest time. But we were alive. We survived. That much was undeniable. Our boots were stained with that horrendous and inexplicable flesh and guts. My pants were covered with ugly blood stains and something as green as the vomit. But the worst part? The worst part was Joshua asking with a trembling voice, Captain? Do you think we'll make it back to Earth alive?